I'm Harper. I'm 27, living in a small Michigan town famous for having one traffic light and a bakery my parents, Tom and Linda, have owned since before I was born. The place smells like cinnamon rolls and burnt coffee, and everyone in town knows them, and by extension, us. Growing up, we were never rich, but we never worried about bills either. My brother Brady, who's 2 years younger, was the golden child. He could flunk geometry, and Dad would say he's just not a numbers guy. Meanwhile, I'd get a B+ in science, and Mom would sigh and remind me I should apply myself. It never really bothered me. I've never needed a spotlight. I was content with my books, my quiet plans, and the dream of one day starting my own creative business. Brady could have the applause. Until it stopped being harmless. 5 years ago, my granddad passed away. He was the only one who treated me like I was worth listening to. Losing him was like losing my safety net. When the will was read, I found out he'd left me a trust fund. Not some huge lottery win, just enough that it would change my life. The catch was, I couldn't access it until I turned 30, and then only for buying property or further education. To me, it felt like Granddad's last way of saying, "You matter, Harper." So I let the money sit and didn't think about it much. I had plans for it eventually, maybe a tiny fixer-upper or grad school. Then Brady got engaged to Hannah. She's 26, charming in that glossy, Instagram-perfect way. You know the type, calls everyone hon, never has a hair out of place, always telling you how blessed she is. I liked her at first, until she started showing her true colors. It happened over dinner at the Copper Spoon, the only place in town with tablecloths. We were passing plates when Hannah turned to me and, as casually as if she was asking for the salt, said, "So, Harper, what are you planning to do with all that money when you finally get it?" I blinked. Probably buy a place or go back to school," I said, trying not to sound offensive. She smiled wide. "That's so lucky. You know, Brady and I could really use help with the wedding. Or maybe a down payment." Brady gave this weird half-laugh, like he wasn't sure if she was serious. I laughed too, assuming it was a joke. But Hannah kept smiling, eyes locked on me, like she was waiting for me to say, "Sure, here's my future. Please take it." My mom jumped in fast. "Well, that money is Harper's." Not really up for discussion. Dad nodded, and for a second, I thought it was over. But if you've ever met someone like Hannah, you know it wasn't over. A couple weeks later, at a barbecue, she brought it up again. "It's just so rare for someone to have that kind of opportunity," she said, all sweetness. "You could really help your family." I smiled and said nothing. Then it kept happening. Every single time I saw her, she'd drop a comment. Brady started chiming in, too, little digs about how it's not like you're using the money right now. The night I knew it was going to get ugly, Hannah cornered me in my parents' kitchen. She didn't bother with fake sweetness this time. "Harper, I really think you should reconsider," she said, her voice low. "Helping us would show you care about your family. Honestly, it's a little selfish to keep it all for yourself." I swallowed. My hands were shaking. I told her calmly it wasn't accessible yet, and even if it were, I had my own plans. Her smile vanished. "I guess I misunderstood what kind of person you are." And she walked away. I stood there staring at the fridge, heart pounding, thinking, this isn't going to stop. Not until I stop it. After that night in my parents' kitchen, it felt like some invisible line had been crossed. I tried to tell myself it would blow over if I ignored it. Spoiler, it did not. Hannah didn't even bother pretending anymore. At every family event, she'd find a way to bring up the trust fund. Once, while my dad was out back grilling, she slipped up beside me like a Disney villain in a floral dress and whispered, "Harper, just think about how much this could help Brady and me. It would be the ultimate gift to the family." I didn't answer. I'd perfected this tight, polite smile that said, "Please stop talking to me before I launch myself into traffic." Brady didn't stay neutral for long. At first, he tried to act like Hannah's little campaign wasn't his idea. But then he started dropping lines like, "I mean, it's not like you've ever really struggled. You could share, you know?" I was so stunned the first time he said it that I just stared at him. Not really struggled? We'd grown up in the same tiny house with the same patchy hand-me-downs. The difference was, I'd worked for everything I had. Brady spent most of his 20s job hopping and blaming everyone else when things fell apart. After the third or fourth time he pulled the "you've always had it easier" card, I stopped biting my tongue. "Brady," I said, "I have a job. I have savings. That didn't fall out of the sky. I worked for it. You could have too." He looked like I'd slapped him. But the worst part wasn't Brady or Hannah. It was my parents. I'd always believed that if things got out of hand, they'd step in and tell everyone to back off. But when I finally sat them down and told them how Hannah was behaving, their reactions felt like a betrayal. My mom wrung her hands. Honey, she just wants to feel included. Maybe she doesn't know how to ask nicely. My dad sighed, looking at the ceiling like he wished he were anywhere else. It wouldn't kill you to think about it, Harper. Sometimes keeping the peace is worth more than money. I felt something crack inside me. The realization that they were more interested in making Hannah comfortable than protecting me hit harder than I'd expected. And then, just when I thought I'd hit peak absurdity, I got an invitation. Brady and Hannah texted me one afternoon, asking if I wanted to meet them for lunch to talk things out. Against my better judgment, I said yes. Maybe some small part of me was hoping this would finally be the end of it. It wasn't. We met at a diner halfway between my apartment and my parents' house. I'd barely sat down when Hannah launched in. Harper, we've been thinking, she began, with that bright, false cheer in her voice. What if you just gave us half the trust fund? You'd still have plenty left for yourself. Half. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I genuinely couldn't believe she'd said it out loud. Hannah, you know I can't even access it yet, I said, trying to keep my tone even. Brady jumped in. We know. But you could plan ahead, set aside the amount now, so when you can get it, it's ready for us. Like I was just a bank waiting to be unlocked. It wasn't even the money itself that got to me. It was the entitlement. The certainty that they deserved something I'd been left because I mattered to someone. I'm not doing that, I told them flatly. I have plans for that money. And even if I didn't, it's still mine. Hannah's smile dropped. She leaned in, voice dropping too. You're being really selfish. You have no idea how much this could help the whole family. I looked at Brady, waiting for him to defend me. He didn't. He just stared at his coffee cup like he was hoping it would swallow him. When I left that diner, I knew it was going to get worse before it got better. A week later, my parents called me over for what they called a family meeting. I should have known. I walked into their living room to see Brady and Hannah sitting on the couch like they were about to pitch me a timeshare. My mom motioned for me to sit. We're just trying to find a compromise, she began. I didn't sit. Dad cleared his throat. Harper, maybe you could consider giving them something. Not half, but a portion. So there it was. My parents, siding with them. I felt my face go hot. I'm not giving you anything, I said quietly. This isn't a group decision. It's not up for discussion. Hannah opened her mouth, but I didn't wait to hear what she had to say. I walked out the door without another word. That was the night I realized just how alone I was in my own family. After that so-called family meeting, I needed space. I turned my phone off and spent the weekend in my tiny apartment, trying to convince myself I wasn't the villain everyone was painting me to be. It didn't help that on Monday, the text started. First, my mom. Mom, honey, we just want you to think about it. Then Brady. Brady, you're making this harder than it has to be. I didn't respond. Silence seemed safer than feeding the fire. But apparently, Hannah wasn't satisfied with silence. She pivoted to a new tactic, telling extended family her version of the story. Within days, I started getting calls from relatives I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. Aunt Trish here. One voicemail began, voice syrupy with fake concern. I just think it's sad you're putting money over family. Maybe you should reconsider before you do something you regret. I sat on my couch listening to that message 3 times. The entitlement was surreal. Meanwhile, Hannah escalated. At the next family dinner, she didn't even bother with her usual bright tone. She waited until Mom went to check the roast, then turned to me. You know, she said coolly, it's not like this money fell out of the sky for you. You're acting like you earned it. I clenched my jaw. I'm acting like it's mine, because it is. She rolled her eyes. Well, it's amazing how selfish you can be and still pretend you're the reasonable one. I didn't say another word. I just stood up and left. That was the moment I stopped caring about being polite. The next morning, I called my lawyer. Her name was Mary Ann, and I'd picked her partly because she didn't have that condescending air so many attorneys do. When I explained everything, she paused for a long moment before saying, Harper, this is harassment, and you're within your rights to put an end to it. She told me to start saving every message and to keep notes on every conversation. If it continues, she said, we'll send a cease and desist letter. I hung up feeling both lighter and sadder than I had in months. Lighter because someone finally said, this is wrong. Sadder because it took a professional to say it, not my own family. The next weeks blurred together in a haze of tension. I stopped going to family dinners. Every time Mom called, I'd let it go to voicemail. She'd leave messages, voice heavy with disappointment. You're overreacting, she'd say. Or, we just want everyone to get along. But getting along was code for give in. Then came the day that still makes me laugh in a grim way when I think about it. Brady and Hannah invited me to coffee just to talk. I knew better than to expect an apology, but I went, hoping maybe they'd finally drop it. Of course, that wasn't what happened. Hannah folded her hands primly on the table. Look, Harper, we're not trying to make you feel attacked. Brady nodded like a bobblehead. Yeah, but you have to admit you're being stubborn. I didn't reply. Hannah took a breath. We've been doing the math. Even a third of the trust fund would give us a fresh start. You'd still have most of it. It was like watching a rerun. The same entitlement. The same expectations. I stood up. This is the last time I'm having this conversation. Don't ask again. I left them staring at their lattes. That night, I sat in bed scrolling through months of messages, trying to understand when this had turned into open war. My stomach hurt thinking about what Granddad would say if he saw all this. He'd probably shake his head and tell me, never apologize for protecting what's yours. And for the first time, I believed it. The next morning, I emailed Marianne copies of every text and voicemail. I told her, I'm ready to move forward. I thought sending everything to my lawyer would feel like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. Instead, it felt like finally stepping off a sinking ship. Marianne drafted the cease and desist letter in under a day. When she sent me the final version, I read it 3 times. It was polite, almost clinical, but it was the strongest thing I'd ever seen on my behalf. It said, in no uncertain terms, that Hannah's behavior was harassment and it needed to end immediately. I didn't warn Brady or my parents. I didn't give Hannah a heads up. I just signed it and told Marianne to send it. The silence afterward was almost soothing. For a couple days, there were no calls, no texts, no guilt trips. I almost let myself hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd all back off now that there were consequences. But that was optimistic. On day 3, my phone lit up with Brady's name. Against my better judgment, I answered. What the hell, Harper? He snapped before I could say anything. A legal letter? Do you know how humiliating that is? Not as humiliating as having you and Hannah spend 6 months trying to bully me, I said, my voice flat. He sputtered, searching for something to say. You're blowing this out of proportion. Am I? I asked. Or are you just mad I stopped letting you push me around? He hung up. A few hours later, Mom called. Her voice was soft, the way it got when she thought she could talk me into anything. Honey, you didn't need to involve a lawyer. You could have just talked to us. I tried, I said quietly. Over and over. You didn't listen. She sighed. We just don't want the family to fall apart over money. It already has, I said, and ended the call. The next day, I learned Hannah wasn't taking the letter well. She started posting vague status updates online, stuff about greedy people and family traitors. She never used my name, but everyone knew who she meant. It might have been petty, but I blocked her on everything. I blocked Brady too. I didn't have the bandwidth to keep reading their version of events. For about a week, things were blissfully quiet. I started sleeping through the night again. I stopped flinching every time my phone buzzed. Then my cousin Elise sent me a text. Elise, hey, just so you know, Hannah's been telling people you were planning to sue her for the trust fund. She's really going around twisting this. That was when I realized the story had grown legs and was running wild without me. Apparently, Hannah was claiming I'd threatened legal action to take money from them, which was so backwards I almost laughed. Instead of correcting the rumors, I let them die on their own. Anyone who actually knew me would know it wasn't true. One evening, my dad called. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity got the better of me. His voice was tired. Harper, I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything, I told him. I wish you'd handled it differently, he murmured. So do I admitted. I wish you'd all listened before it got here. He didn't argue. We sat there in silence, breathing on opposite ends of a chasm that none of us knew how to cross. The next morning, Hannah sent me an email, her first direct message since the letter. Subject, for the sake of the family. Body, Harper, I hope you're happy. You destroyed everything over something that could have brought us closer together. If you change your mind, maybe it's not too late. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I called Marianne and asked if I needed to do anything else. She said no, unless Hannah escalated again, we'd wait. After I hung up, I realized how much lighter I felt. Like I'd finally dropped a weight I'd been carrying alone. It didn't mean the hurt was gone, but it meant I was finally done letting them decide what I owed. After Hannah's last email, I decided to shut the door for good. No more meetings, no more explanations. If they couldn't understand that I had a right to keep what was mine, then I didn't care to keep explaining. I went almost 2 weeks without hearing anything, and for the first time in months, I felt almost normal. I started working longer hours at the marketing firm, going to yoga again, seeing friends. It was like rediscovering who I'd been before this all-consuming fight. And then Brady did something that surprised everyone, including me. He sent a message. Not a guilt trip, not a rant. Just a simple, "Can we talk?" I almost ignored it. But curiosity got the better of me. I agreed to meet at a little coffee shop near the river. The whole drive there, I rehearsed what I'd say, how I wasn't sorry, how I wouldn't budge, how I was done being the villain in their narrative. But when I walked in, I didn't see the smug, entitled Brady I'd gotten used to. I saw my little brother slumped in a chair, looking like someone had unplugged him. He didn't even start with pleasantries. "I ended it," he said, voice hoarse. "Hannah and me. It's over." I blinked. "What?" He rubbed his face with both hands. "I found out she was still telling people you were going to sue us. She even told her parents that you'd promised her half the trust. I don't know why I believed her. I don't know why I thought she actually cared about anything but getting what she wanted." I sat down slowly, unsure what to say. "I thought I was protecting my future," he went on. "But really, I was just letting her pick fights I wasn't strong enough to stop." For a second, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Brady," I said carefully, "you have to understand how much damage you did. You let her turn everyone against me." "I know," he said quickly. "I know, and I'm sorry. I really am." He sounded sincere. "But apologies are easy. I learned that the hard way." "I'm glad you see it now," I said, my voice steady. "But that doesn't mean I'm ready to pretend none of this happened." He nodded, looking like he expected as much. "I'm not here to ask for anything," he said quietly. "I just wanted you to know I see it now." We sat there a while in awkward silence. I didn't know if I believed him, but for the first time in months, I didn't feel cornered. A few days later, Mom called. She sounded different too, deflated, almost. "Brady told us he ended things," she said. "He told us everything." I didn't respond. "I'm sorry, Harper," she added. "I should have listened to you from the start. It should have felt satisfying. But all I felt was tired." "I know," I said softly. "I know you thought you were doing the right thing." There was a pause. "I hope one day you can forgive us." "I hope so too," I said, and meant it, even if I knew it wouldn't happen overnight. That week, something else shifted. Extended family who'd bought into Hannah's sob story started reaching out. Some apologized outright. Others sent stiff, awkward texts saying things like, "Hope you're okay." It didn't fix everything, but it helped. Meanwhile, Hannah went quiet. She disappeared from social media. From what I heard through the grapevine, she moved back to her parents' place. Part of me worried she'd try something else. But weeks passed, and nothing happened. For the first time in ages, it felt like the storm was really over. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sun drop behind the trees, I thought about Granddad. How he'd always told me, family can be your soft place to land, or the ones who push you off the ledge. I finally understood what he meant. For once, I can honestly say that was all I needed. After everything settled, I expected to feel triumphant, like I'd finally won something. But it didn't feel like winning. It felt more like waking up after a bad fever, weak but clear-headed. I kept my distance from everyone for a while. Not out of spite, but because I needed space to remember who I was when I wasn't defending my own boundaries every day. Work became a kind of refuge. I'd get to the office early, stay late, and pour myself into projects that had nothing to do with family or money or trust funds. For once, my life felt like it belonged only to me. One Saturday morning, I was cleaning out my closet when I found a box of old photos. I sat on the floor and flipped through them. Birthdays, vacations, moments that looked happy even if they hadn't always felt that way. There was one picture of Granddad and me sitting on the porch, eating ice cream. He was grinning at me, and I was laughing so hard my eyes were almost closed. I'd forgotten about that day. Seeing it made my throat tighten. I set the photo aside and took a deep breath. I didn't want the memory of him tangled up in all this mess. His gift to me wasn't just the money, it was the reminder that I was allowed to protect my own future. That I didn't have to set myself on fire to keep everyone else warm. In early spring, Brady reached out again. He didn't call, just sent a letter. The handwriting was shaky, like he'd rewritten it a dozen times. He wrote that he was in therapy, trying to understand why he'd let things get so twisted. He admitted that part of him had always believed he was entitled to more, because that was how our parents had treated him. He said he knew sorry wasn't enough, but he wanted me to know he meant it. I didn't reply right away. I let the letter sit on my kitchen counter for days. Then I wrote back, simply, I hope you find peace. I'm working on it too. It wasn't forgiveness, exactly, but it was a start. As for my parents, things were still strained. My mom called now and then, sounding like she didn't know what to say. My dad sent a birthday card with a note about hoping for better days. I kept my responses polite, but short. I didn't trust them yet. Maybe I never would, not fully. But I was willing to let time try. Hannah stayed gone. She never tried to contact me again. From what I heard, she'd moved to Chicago and was living with her sister. Part of me thought she'd reappear one day with another angle. But part of me knew she was too proud to face everyone after her scheme had fallen apart so publicly. Sometimes, I still felt a dull ache thinking about how quickly my family turned on me. Other days, I felt proud. Because in the end, I hadn't let them break me. A month ago, I finally did something I'd been putting off. I made an appointment with the trust lawyer and started the paperwork for when I turned 30. I told him exactly what I planned to do: buy a small house, maybe go back to school later. When I left his office, I felt lighter. Like reclaiming that plan was the last piece I needed to put things back in place. I don't know if my family and I will ever be what we were, but I'm done bending to make everyone else comfortable. This year, I'm spending my birthday at the lake with two of my closest friends. No family obligations, no drama, just peace. When I look back at everything that happened, I still feel sad sometimes. But mostly, I feel clear. I did what I had to do. I protected myself. And finally, I'm building a life that doesn't require anyone's permission but my own.